We got somebody who's been waiting for a bit. This is John calling in from the USA, who wants specifically to talk to you, Jmike. So, John, what's going on?
Not much. I'm one of those Christian apologists, one of those word salad extraordinaires, word salad chefs, I should say. I'm friends with Mike, and we actually started this conversation a little bit before. So, what would be your guys' basic objections to libertarian free will or free will in general? And if free will is true, do you think that would lend probability to God's existence? So sort of like a compound question there.
Sure. Okay. Jmike, I know you know our friend John here, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I was on John's show not that long ago. He does he does some good stuff, and that's the good thing about TikTok is I met John through there, and I've met all these people through here. So that's another reason why people should get in that and expand the community. But yeah, so I don't think that in any aspect, if I can answer the second part of that, is going to lend necessarily credit to God. I think it maybe could, depending on where we go from there. But what I would say is if we look at at T1 or T equals 1, Mike chooses A or B, and then at T equals 2, Mike has chosen A. So from a libertarian free will standpoint, we go back to T1, and you have that same A or B predicament. Well, you're going to probably say that I could have chose otherwise. I'm going to say that everything is the same. I didn't pick my neurons, how they fire. I didn't pick my parents. I didn't pick my brain. I didn't get to go out to the store and shop for the specific neurons that fire specific ways. Nothing that I did that would still be present at T1 is going to change. So it is determined in every aspect for me to still make the decision A at T2.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess I'll talk about mine because, again, you had two questions there. The first one, what's the objections to a libertarian free will? Libertarian free will just conceptually just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I know, for example, if you cut the corpus callosum in my brain, I'm going to react differently. If you ask me something when I just wake up in the morning, whether I want to do something or not, I'm going to act differently than something else. And that's because you're affecting physical things about my body, because I'm a physical being. And so I think being a physical being means I'm a part of the physical systems that exist in the world. And so if you change variables of that physical system, then you're going to be able to change my decisions on things. And that just doesn't make sense on this libertarian idea of free will, especially if you're incorporating some idea of a soul or something, because it seems that all of my choices are based on something physical happening, something that could be changed on a either chemical or some other smaller molecular kind of level. And if that's the case, then what does free will even mean in that context? It becomes kind of just a made up thing at some point for me. I don't understand how it could work. And as to the second question, whether or not it would be evidence for a God, I don't know that free will would be evidence for a God, or at least the Christian God. There seems to be people who believe in God, a Christian God, that don't think that there's free will. And so that doesn't seem to be necessarily incompatible with, depending on your kind of Christianity. Whether it's for a God in general, again, there could be a God that just made us, that gave us to have free will and didn't. So I don't know. I don't know what the difference would be there in terms of proving the existence of God. So there you go, John.
Yeah. So let's see. I'll respond to Mike first. So concerning Matt Dillahunty's analogy of the top, I call it Matt Dillahunty's time machine. If I could go back to T1, could I do otherwise? And as Tim Stratton notes, there's two components to libertarian free will. Sourcehood, which would say that I am the originator of my actions that I chose, that nothing outside me determined that, as you were objecting because, you're a physicalist in some sense, I'd assume. I'm correct about that, Daniel. Mike, are you a property dualist or just straight physicalist?
No, I'm a reductive physicalist.
Okay. And I would just simply say principle of alternative possibilities being able to do otherwise is not necessary for libertarian free will. I still defend that, so we could talk about that as well. But I would just say in that example, as long as nothing causally determined me to do that and I deliberated freely to do that, then I would say that was still free action, even if I couldn't have done otherwise. So that'd be the first thing I said. Okay.
Well, real quick. So would you be making a distinction there between like agent causation and event causation? Like saying that they're separate?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the problem I would have. I would say that if you think about that, like, and for those that aren't familiar with like agent causation, event causation, the agent causation, essentially, they're going to say that those kind of thoughts are going to arise there. But I think that kind of fails in the water, though, because there's still like what you're saying in agent causation as the thought or I'm going to do this is still determined by the set of neurons or your biology, right? Like we can just show this example that I'm not you and you're not me. We're not going to have those same decisions based on those determining factors. And so I don't see how you get out of that with agent causation when every different kind of agent alongside event causation kind of, to me, throws that to the wayside.
So just for clarification, you're not giving a sort of logical incoherence of agent causation. You're just sort of arguing, well, you're still arguing like strict physicalism.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah, I just claim that my thoughts are not equivalent to my brain, and there's duality there, whether you defend hylomorphic dualism and substance dualism. I'm not a neurologist, neither are you guys, but I know there are neurologists who have won the Nobel Peace Prize. There's a quote from one that J.P. Moreland always uses, who believes in the soul, interestingly enough. So that's quite the debate for them. I just have to hear the arguments for physicalism instead of, just the assertion. But of course, it's a call-in show. We're not good.
Well, I think the soul is an assertion. I don't doubt that there's incredibly intelligent people that believe that there is a soul, but I've never seen it demonstrated in a scientific paper. I mean, like, that's what it's going to have to come down to at the end of the day. It doesn't matter that, these scientists believe that thing, right?
I don't think the metaphysics of physicalism are demonstrated in scientific papers either. I think scientific findings are. I think
I think that's the problem I kind of have with this. I think Dan's raising a good point. But even if we get there, like even if we go with like Dan's hypothetical and we get to kind of testing these things, I don't see that we have a falsification criterion for these types of ideas. Mm-hmm. And how are you going to falsify this immaterial soul? Like how do you do that?
How do we demonstrate a human that doesn't have a soul, for example? How do we distinguish that?
Yeah, it seems that, and I don't want to, and I respect
a human who doesn't have a soul.
Well, so my thing is that it seems that like if we're going to say, especially if we get into the soul thing, because I don't see any way that we're going to falsify this in an honest test for science. And someone could argue, well, that's not the only way we come to truth. Well, you're going to have to then present that methodology because as far as I'm concerned, we have the a priori and a posteriori kind of concepts here. But if beyond that, it's like if we're going to falsify it or let's just say we're doing this study and we're going to try to find ways to falsify it, like it sounds like all we're doing whenever we throw those away is it seems that these types of immaterial claims or God claims or all these kind of things that are lumped in here don't want to go through the rigorous process that science has to offer to do things. It almost sounds like it kind of wants to sidestep it. And that's where I get off board because at the beginning of the show, I'm saying if it shouldn't have a problem with investigation, and this is one of the most reliable ways. I'm not saying it's not an empiricist, not advocating for scientism, but this is a very good way to at least come to some distinction of maybe a fallibilistic assessment of knowledge, right? So why would we not apply that? Or would you? I don't want to straw man. I go with the classical William Lane Craig how he answers these types of objections with methodology. So I just say you'd have to have some sort of deductive argument with premises, conclusions, and then science can be used to defend premises, but the science itself doesn't necessarily. I don't think the science itself are equivalent to those conclusions because people make those conclusions and people can be wrong about their conclusions. Yeah. So, but would that not be that wouldn't really be a problem for a fallibilistic, like, so science is pretty much under this fallible assessment, right? And that's kind of I think, my grounding too. I don't have a problem with induction or any of these things because I'm never claiming Cartesian certainty. The only way I'll get into certainty is maybe into like, if we get into like epistemic solipsism or something like that, but that's a different conversation.
Sure. Yeah, so I think you could falsify the soul if you came up with a better explanation for thoughts independent of the brain and so on, that duality that we have there. Or if you make sort of like an inductive argument against soul using...
Why do we have to make arguments to
logical
demonstrate it, though? Like, why can't we observe it? Is the soul not something that we can observe?
Well, interestingly enough, Gary Habermas, he's written a book on near-death experiences, and while you can't obviously directly observe near-death experiences, they're well medically journaled and so on. I wouldn't use that as evidence for Christianity. I'd use that as maybe evidence for to falsify naturalism, if you have to redefine naturalism to fit near-death experiences into that worldview.
I guess, but
So
like
I'd say that's one.
But near-death experiences aren't souls, right? Like, how do we demonstrate the soul? Because could we conceivably have a near-death experience and not have souls? So, like, what makes the soul, more reasonable to believe than to not?
Yeah, do we have like a novel testable prediction or something we could get out of it and kind of say, hey, this theory is more credible because it produces this prediction, or like what can we do?
I mean, it's not a question I've thought about when it comes to predictions in the soul. I'd maybe say there's better abduction reasoning with the soul and inductive reasoning. But so Descartes, I think, therefore I am, you agree with that, Mike, right? Because we had this conversation last night. I think that proves that you can have real mental deliberations, and that's just intuitively true. And like to deny that and to argue, well, it's really just neurons going on. I think that's a premise you have to defend first.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm saying, right? Like, what makes the statement, what makes our ability to say, I think, therefore I am, mean that we have a soul?
Well, is there really mental causation, or is it just the brain, the physical brain parts? Like, is there really a substance of thoughts? I think part of the soul would be that substance of thoughts, substance of mentality.
Wait, so does that mean like gorillas and chimpanzees have souls? Because I mean, they can communicate through sign. Like Coco did sign language with humans. So like,
sure. Yeah, no, I would think humans have souls. I mean, I have a goal.
No, I'm asking like other species outside of humans. Does that mean they have souls?
Yeah, I'd say so. They have consciousness.
Oh.
I'm also a holomorphic dualist, not a substance dualist, so they would explain it a little bit differently, but that's a bunch of philosophical jargon that...
But is consciousness the same as... I agree that they have consciousness, but is consciousness the same as a soul, though?
It's part of the soul, I'd say.
Okay, so we have some physical explanation for a soul, then, right? Because like we can recognize what makes something conscious through physical parts. Like, you do agree that we can't be conscious without physical things happening, right?
Well, and this, as a holomorphic dualist, I say that humans need both body and this thing we call the soul that contains consciousness, the mind, in order to be fully human and to have that proper functioning. Because, you got the interaction problem where, you got damaged brain parts, and obviously you interact differently. I'd say, yeah, the soul that is meant for this body that has to make this rational structure, if I'm explaining holomorphic dualism correctly, which I think I am, that has to be proper or it just won't work.
Would you agree, though, you need some kind of like simpler explanation? And like you would agree, like in terms of like a simpler explanation towards something that we can produce like a prediction off of would be more viable, right? Because it sounds like you're adding something that all of this can be explained by natural and physical processes. I mean, sure, I will grant you the hard problem of consciousness. We haven't gotten to the root of this. This is still, one of those topics I love to talk about, but I don't see where the introduction of like the immaterial, I don't see where the introduction of the immaterial all of a sudden explains something that the physical isn't explaining and demonstrating that it's explaining.
Yeah, I also don't come from the physical aspect, so you guys have the hard problem of consciousness. I don't.
Well, no, I would say that's not fair. I would say that everybody is going to have this problem until we kind of root it in, whether it's your position of the mental or my position of the physical. This is kind of similar to like the natural, like me being a naturalist, right? Naturalism best explains everything. I'm not saying it is the de facto everything's natural, right? I'm also a methodological naturalist, so I'm not like denying any of these metaphysical or philosophical naturalist position or claiming that position. But what I would be saying is that
I'm a metallurgical naturalist too, so.
Well, so then you could kind of get on board with me here and like walk with me here. Is that
in science inquiry, but the soul would be quite the metaphysical claim, not the science claim.
Yeah, but again, these things, when I say like they're best explained by physical processes, is because we only have these physical processes which to go by off of. Like, it's like kind of the resurrection thing when it's like, this is the most, I'm going to use an abductive argument to say that it's most likely that Jesus resurrected. Well, it's not though, because we don't actually have any data point to reference, right? If I took you to like an Excel spreadsheet and we're going to list out on one side, like, natural explanations for this, and then on the other side, we're going to appeal to supernatural or immaterial things. The side for the immaterial is going to have nothing on it. Like, we don't even have any data point to reference. Whereas like, even if this might be the most outlandish physical or natural explanation, by default, it's going to have more explanatory property or power because that's what we've rooted this in. Not to exclude that, and not to take the metaphysical or the supernatural card off the table, so to speak. But I've never seen my need in my epistemology or methodology to have to use that or lift that card up to explain anything that the set of physical explanations couldn't just explain. Testable predictions.
Hey, John, we have to get to some other callers here. We got some people waiting on the line, but I want to give you a chance to give. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate you taking my call. We really got off free will there. I wasn't even ready to talk about it. I was listening to
we did
free will. I guess I would say that if one is a metaphysical naturalist, then of course it's really hard to see evidence for the soul and for God, but that's a whole other topic. So I guess that's what I'll end with.
Okay. Well, thanks so much.
I appreciate you taking my call.
John, thank you for calling in, man.
I do appreciate it. And interesting conversation. But I do think it's funny, and I don't want to continue the conversation when John's not here because that's not fair. But like to say that it's harder when we talk about the soul and we talk about God, but it's like, but why? It's like, I think you and I share the same kind of feeling, Jmike, where it's like, if we have a physical explanation for stuff, the soul just kind of becomes an extra thing. Now, I'll give John some credit here. He is the first Christian I've ever talked to that said gorillas have souls. That's a new one for me.
John's awesome.
That's pretty cool.
John's awesome. Cool. I love talking
I didn't expect that. I never heard that before. I was like, oh, okay. Well, this is a new argument then if we're including that.
Yeah, he's awesome.
But
he runs a JMD Apologetics 101, and it's a good channel. Really, it is.
Hey, props to that. If you include that objection into your worldview, like, okay, like you're at least accepting some observations there that other people, when I bring that up, like they have a lot of trouble, like kind of getting to, because it's hard when you really study these other animals and you can just see how close they are to our capacities of cognition. And sometimes the only difference really is just the language and obviously some other things, but like just to see how close they are, it does make you think, well, if they can do all of this and, classically speaking, they don't have souls, right? That's not John's position, but a lot of Christians think, then like, what does that mean about us? What is the real difference between us and these other animals? And that's a fascinating thing altogether. But we got a lot of other people that want to talk to us